Well, hello again, YouTube. Welcome to Great Albums. This is episode 1. I just got this idea basically yesterday. A video popped up on my feed. It was the 30th anniversary of the release date of the band Faith No More's sophomore album, Angel Dust. Angel Dust is a celebrated album. I would consider Angel Dust to be a great album. So I thought, maybe I could do some great albums series, and maybe this would be enjoyable for people who are already fans of these great albums, and perhaps I could twist some proverbial arms of some people to check out some music they had never really given a shake. I know that seems unusual that a great rock album could exist, that someone watching this channel would have missed it. Irregardless, I'm going to go for it. I don't think there will be a schedule, a theme song, title card. And again, there is so many people that have actual music content channels where they do a great job reviewing. The guy with the suit with the 70s, the fern, and him like reviewing the Pink Floyd stuff like Fantano, all these people who really do a great job with music related content. And then here is petey. So keep in mind, it is what it is. And I don't want to take myself real seriously in this, but I also want to be respectful to the material. So that being said, let's dive into the Beatles White Album. This is the Beatles' 9th album. It's their only double album. It was, I don't want to say controversial, but since it came out, people have taken both sides about it being opulent, that it should have been 2 albums. Ringo said the White Album and the Whiter Album. It could have been a single album and then some singles and B-sides. Typically back then, the single did not appear on the album. In this case, there were a couple of things released. I believe Hey Jude was released a few months before the White Album. The White Album came out in November, maybe November 22nd of 1968. And how do you know that?
Because I heard it kind of close, but I heard it, yeah.
And it's very close to one of our children's birthdays. And since then, people have, one of the things that people say who are negative about the White Album is just that. And like George Harrison even felt like, now my way of looking at it is the opposite. I look at the White Album that it's perfect, that it represents a real honest break from the kind of contrived, and did it age well, the psychedelia? I don't know. I mean, Magical Mystery Tour, that's what came out right before the White Album. It was shown on Boxing Day as a film. Of course, there was an album. The album is good. And Sgt. Pepper certainly is... obviously, that's LSD. And with me, I always talk about post-LSD Beatles, and I was thinking about that today. Post-LSD Beatles, meaning after the LSD experience, which I would consider to be really Sgt. Pepper and then Magical Mystery Tour. So their work after the acid experience represented, the 3 albums being the double White Album, Abbey Road, and Get Back. Now, in this period of time, we see Paul kind of taking the helm, and really what happened, I feel, in the Beatles was each one of these members, well, not all of them, but some of them, realizing that they don't need the other Beatles to continue on. So this is the Beatles breaking up. You can hear the Beatles break up on that album, a quote from John Lennon. And the post-LSD Beatles thing, meaning that that's my favorite era of the Beatles. A lot of strife, but there's also something really weird about them pulling in different directions, and what you end up with is what critics have said is the first postmodern, post-rock, and there's a whole list of Schadenfreude, all these different psychological terms that the White Album presents to the listener, as it's this monumental, better than an A+ rating, simply because it is so unique, so many different ideas and styles. Typically, oftentimes we've seen people changing styles in songs, and the Beatles even did that, but each statement remains unique to its styling. And there is a lot of different styles on the album. We have the first heavy metal, the birth of a genre with Helter Skelter. We have Paul McCartney channeling the 1920s, and then all-out experimental or avant-garde piece by John Lennon with Revolution number 9. So it is very difficult to categorize, but its strength lies within its whole. This entire series, I can just foresee the type of stuff I'm going to be choosing. These are albums. They are meant for you to sit down with an equilateral triangle in between your ears and the speakers, meaning equal distant all the way between the speakers, that same measurement to your ears with the speakers tilted a bit. Get your bass and treble, get your EQ, have access to the volume control so you can adjust as necessary, and consume, or better yet, headphones with an EQ. And close your eyes, get the album cover so you can look at the artwork and absorb it from start to finish as it was meant to be consumed. Now, the White Album, I was exposed to it on vinyl. That was my thing. Was we had a turntable in my dad's office, Philco brand turntable, and we had a collection of James Bond theme music records. My brother started buying Beatles albums. I was listening to those. Then I went off into Pink Floyd. After that, I was listening to cassettes. I did have cassette copies of the Beatles albums, and it's interesting to note, I have a copy of the Beatles White Album on cassette. The artwork is different. It's what is known as the Kelly photos, which are the individual pictures of the Beatles that came in there was a poster, and then there was 4 individual, like 8x10. I believe they were colorized. These are the Kelly photos. So the cassette artwork is black and white. There is no gray. Images of the Beatles. There is a silver image or a gold image of an apple with a silver outline, I believe, or is it a green outline? Gold apple with a green outline, and it is labeled the Beatles. Now, the album originally was embossed with the word the Beatles. Later on, there's some copies that are just gray ink. Originally, they were numbered. The first number 0001 was 1 through 4 were given to the Beatles themselves, and the serial numbers closer you got to 1 are worth more money. More recently, there was an exhibition in New York City. I would have loved to have seen this. The guy put together a recording of 100 versions of the album being played at the same time. Also, he had, I think, over 3,000 physical copies of the vinyl with all the artwork, the records in the sleeves. And this was designed as a record store. You could go in there and he had them all on display. Some were incredibly water damaged, like just destroyed. But it was really cool. I saw video on that, so if you're a fan, you might want to check that out. Getting back to the story with the album, they had gone through the psychedelic period, completely changed everything, and the critics flipped out. Everyone flipped out over Sgt. Pepper. It was a huge deal. The next thing they did was Magical Mystery Tour, and that was a failure. It was an album and a movie it was a television special that was shown on Boxing Day, which is December 26th. So this was shown in England on December 26th, and a lot of people really didn't like it, and for good reason. It's without direction. It's a little bit aimless. It attempts to capture the joy that is an LSD come up, that sense of mystery and infinite joy that you feel in that experience. But it was really poorly put together. It lacked direction and suffered from just a general attempt of let's just let it roll and hope for the best, and it didn't come out very good. That being said, there are moments of unique psychedelia for the time, but it does not really age well. If you're a huge fan, definitely you've already seen it. And I don't know why you're watching this video, but if you've never seen Magical Mystery Tour, the next one was Yellow Submarine, and that's their cartoon, the animated thing they did, which was coming off the heels of that psychedelic experience, but it was almost more geared toward children. Although they did make some statements in there, the blue meanies, the police, you know. So we have that LSD period, and generally this feeling in the air that the Beatles, the Magical Mystery Tour thing, it just, you know, after 67 and things were changing, the news was not favorable to hippies, especially after the Manson thing. We have Altamont. There was a lot of bad things that happened where people were sick of hippies, especially in the media. So a tough time to be with flowers in your hair. And the next move that they made was to put the drugs aside and travel to Rishikesh, India, to study under the Maharishi yogi. And they were going to learn transcendental meditation. George Harrison really led them into this phase. Ringo left after 2 weeks. He brought with him, his suitcases were full of cans of Heinz baked beans because he had a stomach thing, and Indian food is full of curry. So he got sick, came back after 2 weeks. Lennon and Harrison stayed the longest, but they did not complete the course. Now there were 60 people. Donovan, Mia Farrow, her sister Prudence Farrow, who never came out of her room, and there's that Dear Prudence song which was written about her. Also, what occurred was some accusations that the yogi Maharishi had made passes at some of these young, beautiful women that had gone with the Beatles down there. So it appeared he was a fake. He was a phony. He was just trying to get into the pants of these attractive white European girls that accompanied the Beatles. Now later on, and I just learned this today, Cynthia Lennon said there was absolutely no grounds for that, that it was not true. So according to a few people, because later on the Beatles learned that was all, that was not true. There were false accusations. So that casts that whole experience in a different light. I had always heard that, and of course bought into the fact that this guy was weak and that he was a sham. Nonetheless, they did go to India, and they had acoustic guitars there during the day. They would fervently work on writing these songs at night. And then during the day, Paul and John would have these covert meetups where they would play each other what they were working on. Now, they wrote like 30 pieces of music. I think they wrote 40. 16 of the pieces of the 30 songs on the White Album are Lennon's. Ringo's makes some appearance. Ringo's songs are great. This is for me perhaps the highlight, that Goodnight song. And Ringo wrote I'm going to have to look up the Ringo song because now I'm just completely blank. Let me refer to, here's the track listing. Don't Pass Me By. And George Harrison also, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Piggies, Long, Long, Long is perhaps George Harrison's finest moment with the Beatles as a songwriter, and Savoy Truffle. Now, during the recording of this album, like they have this experience in India, they're not tripping or doing any drugs, they're just smoking weed, so they generally have fairly clear heads, and weed is something that for some people can really help them creatively. When they come back and they did these demo process where they recorded demos at George Harrison's place, and those demos ended up being released. Those sessions were filled with a return to the feeling of the original Beatles. All four together, the spirit of camaraderie, and they were happy. And when they ended up going back into the machine with George Martin and BBC, they were miserable. It was not good. Which is reflected in them beginning to pair off or just work by themselves. Now, at the time, EMI, the BBC, had not yet installed an 8-track recorder. They had a 4-channel recorder, which means one track of the tape would be your drums and your bass. One track would be guitars and vocals. Another track would be backup vocals and keyboards, and a final track for overdubs. Well, imagine if you had just working within those constraints where each track you were forced to have 2 things on it, and then all of a sudden you've got 8 tracks, or 12, 16, 24. Now typically, like for me, when I record, it's at least 24 tracks. I remember one piece had 77 tracks. Of course, some of those tracks were just one sound effect, but when you got them, you use them, and it's a lot easier, for me it is, on mixing when I don't have to combine different sounds on one channel. You're free to really EQ, use an equalizer, and just balancing the levels, it's infinitely easier. So they they ended up going to another studio. Begins with a T, Twickenham, Tanklenuck, Tininin. This other studio, they did Dear Prudence, I forget, but that studio already had the 8-channel, and by doing that, they also insisted that Abbey Road Studios get off their butt because they had the 8-channel machine. Now, normally, they're Abbey Road, so they get their white coat guys go in there and take everything apart and customize it to their needs, make it better. If it's got a solid state transistor, let's put tubes in it, or whatever they did. And that's what they were supposed to do, and this 8-channel machine was just sitting there. So, because of course it's not only the tape deck, it's the mixing board as well. So they put pressure on them, they went to Twickenham, and in the meantime, without permission from the owners, EMI, they had their engineers install the 8-channel machine and use it for the rest of the recordings. So we see at one moment, here's Paul McCartney, and he's working on Blackbird. In another studio, we got George Harrison. He's bringing in Eric Clapton to play the guitar on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and Clapton's like, well, nobody plays on a Beatles album, and Harrison said, this isn't the Beatles, this is mine. This is my piece. And Lennon is in another studio working on Revolution number 9 with Yoko Ono. They get together on lunch and they go visit Paul McCartney, and it's like you can cut through the air. It's so uncomfortable. And again, this being the first instance where Lennon, had been a rule, no wives, no girlfriends, no dogs allowed in the studio. And Lennon was bringing in Yoko Ono, who sat on the amplifier and, of course, did not break up the Beatles. And it also should be noted that Pattie Boyd and Miss Starkey, I forget her name. What was Ringo's wife's name?
I only know who's current.
They were there too, and Pattie Boyd and Yoko are singing backups on, is it Bungalow Bill, or they're on Bungalow Bill, but there's another one. So let's look at the track listing. Back in the USSR, Mike Love was people really don't like Mike Love. People like to hate on that guy, and when you look into it, it all kind of like I don't know. It doesn't seem so unwarranted, I'll say, but I don't know Mike Love. He might be a great guy. He said some really horrific, terrible things about other people in the business, but he might be a great guy. I don't know. Mike Love had said something about you got to do a song, girls in the USSR. Blah, 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 saying you need to do this, do that, like we've got these backup vocals. So McCartney did it. And that particular song has a blend of McCartney, John Lennon, and George Harrison playing the drums. It's not Ringo, but it's also not McCartney. And a lot of these tracks, you see, it's just like they're just working solo. And the only time George Martin gets involved is with Paul, which is telling. Now, back in the USSR, they used the first mobile portable recording to do a field recording to record that jet. Now, I flew, sorry to go off topic, but I flew to see my brother was in the Navy. He had gotten in some trouble, and rather than put him in jail, they said, go join the service. He ended up getting in the Navy, and he was stationed at this place called Point Mugu, which is Oxnard, California. It's basically on the West Coast. It's right, the base is on the ocean. So he flew me out there when I was like 13 or 14 for my spring break, and I spent the week living in his bunk, in his, he didn't ask anybody in the Navy, and my parents let me go. We went to Disney and Universal, and at the time I was into the Beatles. So I brought with a little tape recorder, like a Panasonic mono. I had some adapter and some little jogging headphones, C batteries in the tape deck, and I remember hitting play. This was all planned out, and hearing Magical Mystery Tour as the plane took off. Or it might have been, I started out, the first song was back in the USSR, hearing the plane take off, having it queued up. So when I hit it, we would be, as that sound effect playing, we would be lifting up off the ground. And I had all of the hair on my body standing on end, and this, like, I almost passed out. It was waves of euphoria. The music does this to me. And then the second song I listened to was Magical Mystery Tour. And going into Dear Prudence, this is Mia Farrow's little sister. Guessing she was attractive. She did not come out of her room. She was just meditating in there. And Lennon wrote this, Dear Prudence, won't you come out to play? It features a finger picking on the guitar that Donovan, hurdy-gurdy man Donovan, had taught Lennon how to do this. And it's a descending arpeggio. It's a beautiful piece. Everybody has covered Dear Prudence. It's just one of the most beautiful songs. Glass Onion is John Lennon making fun of his fans, trying to interpret secret messages out of the song. There's callbacks to other tunes. The Walrus was Paul. You told you about the Fool on the Hill, and then McCartney comes in with that recorder and plays the lick, this is the type of musical stuff that, like, Pink Floyd does. The Beatles did it here, and I absolutely love that stuff. Obla Di Obla Da may have been the song that broke up the Beatles. They did like 100 takes. There was 3 versions of it. The third version was only a few takes before they said quit. There was another musician who used to say Obla Di Obla Da, life goes on. He was a reggae guy, Jimmy Cliff maybe, I forget. But that guy tried to claim rights. And it's credited to Lennon McCartney. But Lennon hated it. And it is a polarizing song. There are people that do not like that. Wild Honey Pie represents this thing they would do with incidental bits of music. Can You Take Me Home? There's these little things in there, short little segments that serve as palate cleansers, which differentiate this album from the other standard format of having 3 seconds of silence. This was a standard, and they crossfade these songs, and they have little incidental bits, which makes it one of the reasons why I love the White Album so much. Is it stepped out and it broke all the boundaries. This is the Beatles on their own as magnificent songwriters at the end of their career, at the peak of their songwriting. This is just a truly great album. The continuing story of Bungalow Bill, there was a son of a rich guy who was there in Rickekesh, and this guy left to go hunt tigers. And Lennon wrote this to mock the guy. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, George Harrison had written this song. His mom actually helped him with some of the lyrics. Happiness is a Warm Gun. Lennon claims he was in a dentist's office, and this was on the cover of a gun magazine. It has some tempo changes and different time signatures in it. They did 100 takes. Again, when I say 100, it means more than 80. So I'm not exactly sure on the number of takes, but and it's edited together from 2 of the best takes of 2 different versions. But Happiness is a Warm Gun, definitely a high moment. Martha, My Dear, John Lennon, Paul McCartney wrote the song, was influenced by his sheepdog Martha. The lyrics don't really jive with that, but the title. And it's, again, this is, John Lennon went on to say things about Paul McCartney's music being too lighthearted, too not relevant, and too silly. This would be a good example of that. I'm so tired. John Lennon had this thing when he was in Rickekesh where he could not sleep. And I love I'm So Tired. It's just one of John Lennon's better songs in my book. Blackbird, written about, influenced by the human rights things going on in the 60s. Paul McCartney was influenced by this. And there is a rumor that the clicking sound you hear is a metronome, when in fact Jeff Emmerich, or was it that Tate guy, I forgot, somebody said they mic'd Paul McCartney's foot. But that part is played by Paul McCartney. It's him with the acoustic guitar singing, and the Bird song is off of the EMI or BBC sound effect library. Rocky Raccoon. This is the song that you pick when you do karaoke. You do Rocky Raccoon first, then you can do Piggies, then you can do Minnie the Moocher. And by the time you get up for Minnie the Moocher, you will have won them over. These are all easy songs to do in karaoke. And you do the hidey, 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 and then you point the mic out and you'll get call in return. And in return, you'll get a real lot of applause because people participated. So that's my karaoke tip for the day. Rocky Raccoon, another song that a lot of people don't like, a lot of people love. I'm one of those people that love Rocky Raccoon. It's just a great story song and a great performance by Paul McCartney. Don't Pass Me By, Richard Starkey, Ringo Starr just does an absolutely fantastic job. There's some lines in that song, you were in a car crash and you lost your hair, point back to that Paul is dead theory. Why don't we do it on the road? McCartney saw 2 monkeys getting it on in the middle of the street in India, and the thought crossed on him how we are hung up and hide everything in private. So that song was done it was McCartney and Ringo by themselves, and Lennon got pissed about it. He was like, I would have liked to have been in on that one. And McCartney's response was, well, this is payback for you not letting me in on Revolution number 9, because McCartney was the first guy in the Beatles to play around with tape loops. So he felt like he had cornered that market, and when Lennon started doing it and then ended up using it on the album, he felt a little bit miffed, which I understand that. I really do. It's just kind of sad that the Beatles devolved into the level of petty jealousies that they did. On the other hand, it gave us the White Album. So I'm going to zip it. None of my beeswax. I Will is fantastic, perfect pop music by Paul McCartney. Julia is a song penned, which is a combination of John Lennon's mother and his affair with Yoko Ono, being the ocean child. Now, Julia Lennon lost her life prematurely. Someone ran her over. I believe it was a police officer. It's very interesting when you hear these theories about MI6's department, Tavistock for Human Relations, that they created the Beatles. Theodore Adorno wrote all the music for the Beatles. If that's true, maybe, were they handed this packet before they went to Ricochet, or did they really write these songs? Is this the first time when the Beatles really break free and are able to write their own music? It's crazy to think that there's some conspiracy that these people that have all this money, this bloodline going back to the Pharaohs, are running everything, and they gave us LSD and produced the teen generation, and the whole rock and roll thing was manufactured. Try to remove the power structure of the church and the patriarchy and replace that with the state. And that when these people turned on and took the LSD and they realized what was going on and started opposing the Vietnam War, then it was time to put the genie back in the bottle because their experiment had kind of failed. So CIA went to the people, the chemical companies, and demanded that they stop distributing the chemicals that are the precursors to manufacture LSD, and at the same time flood the market with a chemical, STP-DOM. It's many more times powerful than LSD. It's actually a methamphetamine-based hallucinogen. That 50,000 hits of this were distributed in the Hague at the same time when the acid washed up. They also replaced the hashish, weed, and LSD that fueled the hippie generation with heroin and speed. So the end of the rainbow for the hippie generation was not peace and love or putting a flower in the end of someone's weapon. It was addiction, disease, and death. And was that hand played? Was there this police officer paid off to run over Julia Lennon in an effort to fully control John Lennon? We'll never know. But it makes a great conspiracy theory. Put your tinfoil hats on. Let's ride. Whoosh. Side 3, we have Birthday. This is Lennon and McCartney. That's the song that Pamela, what's her name? Eric Clapton stole her from George Harrison.
You just said her name earlier. I can't remember.
Yeah, Patty. Patty and Yoko sing backups on Birthday. And that was, whose birthday was it? It's John and Paul got together and wrote this during the day and recorded it at night. And so that was a one-day deal. And it's just a magnificent piece, example of the Beatles at their best. Your Blues, brilliant John Lennon. He wrote this in Ricochet because he was even out here, he had issues, John Lennon did. He was this creative genius and blah, 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 but he wasn't really in control of his emotions very well. And at this time, he was suffering depression, which he wrote that out in Your Blues. And that song is musically, it's based on this, like, Peter Green, Jimi Hendrix, Cream, kind of aggressive, hard rock sound that was emerging at the time. Mother Nature's Son, incredibly beautiful piece. Some people say it's about weed. They were smoking in India. McCartney just completely outdid himself. Absolutely mind-numbingly beautiful song, covered eloquently and wonderfully by the most excellent Harry Nilsson. Everybody's got something to hide except for me and Yoko Ono is the monkey. This is something that John Lennon said that. This is something that, because she was perceived as being different because she was not white. Everybody's got something to hide except for me was something that the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi used to say. So Lennon took that, put that spin on it. That's a rocker. That's a really fun song. Sexy Sadie was something that replaced Maharishi. He was singing Maharishi, what have you done? And he twisted that around and changed it to Sexy Sadie at the last minute. This is one of Lennon's solo pieces that the band actually assisted him on a little bit. Helter Skelter, misinterpreted by Charles Manson. This is a slide. When you climb to the top, you slide to the bottom, and you go back up. It's something that's popular in Britain at their fun fairs and parks. Helter Skelter was, Paul McCartney read this article in a trade paper, Teen Beat, or the British rock and roll trade paper. I forget what it's called, Smokestack Lightning, and Pete Townsend had said, we just made the nastiest, filthiest piece of music that has ever existed in rock. And Paul McCartney never heard it. He just said, you think you can make the nastiest, filthiest sound in rock? I got one for you. Now, originally, Helter Skelter was a 10-minute song. There's different edits of it, but you hear Ringo Starr, I've got blisters on me fingers. And that's because wailing on the drums for a little bit too long. Another one of those 100-take songs, but it's a blueprint for the heavy metal to come later. And we played it in our version. Our daughter burned a Barbie doll with the Ronson. Kind of like Jimi Hendrix when he's doing the flames are leaping up, but it was a Barbie doll. And you hear on the tape of that, half of the people get it and they're like, yeah. And the other half of the people are like, oh my goodness, no. Long, George Harrison's one of his more eloquent moments with the Beatles. And again, Ringo walked out in August and came back in September. He had quit the Beatles for 2 weeks. Harrison decorated his drum kit with flowers upon his return. They were begging him to come back. But Ringo's problem was he was continually feeling more and more like he was being used. That this was just Paul's deal. Paul, Brian Epstein had managed the Beatles and he died. So, people say September 11th, 1966, Paul McCartney died and was replaced. For whatever reason, I'm not putting tinfoil on it, but I'm just saying for whatever reason, Ringo did leave. He quit. And it seemed like pretty much everybody wanted out except Paul. Paul was wanting to keep it together. They made this Apple Corporation, a Paul Apple, and part of that was spread their money all around, financing these other projects, and this is all part of the reason that the Beatles broke up. It wasn't so much Yoko Ono sitting on an amp. Harrison felt the same way. Harrison felt like John Lennon and Paul McCartney wouldn't let him use any of the songs he had written. Like they had had time to mature as songwriters through the Beatles, and they wouldn't let him even get one in. And he was like writing like crazy at the time, and his songs are really good. Like, as a kid, I didn't really realize that. Like, This song is George Harrison's. He wrote this. And it's really good. It's a completely different thing. His songs have a different flavor. The lyrics have a different flavor, and they're miles away from the bubblegum pop that Paul McCartney was writing and the sarcastic, tripped out wordplay of John Lennon. I'm not saying anything bad about John Lennon as a songwriter. He was brilliant. And something like A Day in the Life, Strawberry Fields, I mean, you simply cannot top John Lennon's writing. Until you get to a good George Harrison song. So Revolution #1, there was a lot of back and forth about this revolution, and there was a lot of to do about John Lennon and his politics. The song was kind of a curse for him. He ended up really not liking it. There's different versions of it. There's a slow version, a fast version, and then the Revolution #9, which is it's a perfect avant-garde piece, but we're going to get to that in a minute. Honey Pie, McCartney doing his song and dance routine, his vaudeville cutesy pie. You can't argue with it. It's a toe tapper, but when you put it up against Savoy Truffle, which is a psychedelic. Savoy Truffle was a type of candy that came in a packet of chocolates. This was a favorite chocolate of Eric Clapton. That's the title. And if the kind of the theme of it is excess, like gorging yourself. That's the theme. Cry Baby Cry, John Lennon. What can I say? I wish I had something to say about Cry Baby Cry other than it's a complicated story song that paints a picture that's kind of about spent youth, I would say, or the lessons that you learn in coming out of your childhood. One of John Lennon's finer moments. I know I keep saying that on here like, oh, this is John Lennon's best. Revolution #9, this came out of Yoko Ono and John Lennon's first date where they played around with these tape machines. And I got to tell you, yeah, you flip it around. Here's one. Take your microphone, say, number nine. Say that and then flip it around backwards and what do you hear? Because it'll be, yeah, Deadman. Turn me on, Deadman. And it will. So how all that happened with the Beatles and their backmasking, either there were demons working overtime or it's just one of the hugest coincidences. I will never know. But there is some weird stuff, and Revolution #9 is part of that. It's a grotesque, puts my stomach in a knot listening to it, challenging piece of music. It's almost like going through the House of Horrors at the Fun Park, listening to #9. But it's perfect. It's a perfect piece of avant-garde or sound collage. And I don't blame John Lennon for keeping it in the circle that he did, that not letting Paul McCartney in on it. Because I can only imagine Paul would have wanted geese and ducks, baby ducks, and foghorns. Which brings us to the end. Good Night, Ringo Starr. This is a song that John Lennon wrote for, oh, look at that, it's credited for Starr.
No, that's the vocals.
Oh, this is vocals, look at that. Okay, Lennon wrote Good Night for his son, Julian. He felt guilty about not being around, wrote this piece for him. And originally it was Lennon with an acoustic guitar. Ringo tracked the piece over Lennon's acoustic guitar, and they just dumped John Lennon's vocal performance. Then, what's his name? George Martin did the orchestral music that we hear. But this is a perfect way to end the album and a perfect way to end the video. I got to tell you guys, this was fun for me. I hope you will give the album a shot. Like I said, put your headphones on, listen to it all the way through. That's the way it's meant to be consumed. I hope you'll come back for more of these. I'm not sure when we'll have the next episode or how many of them there will be, but it's going to be diverse. It's not going to be like the next one that I do is going to be Abbey Road. More than likely, there you may see some doubles, even some triples. But again, music is subjective, and this is what I think is great. So that being said, thank you so much for joining me for Great Albums, Episode 1, the Beatles White Album. Take care of yourselves. Try to stay cool or warm. If you've got a pet that you're physically able to pick it up and show it some affection, maybe even give it a little hug, you can do that for me. What's that?
I don't know, something. I don't know. He found something. I don't know.
Do you mind if I finish my video?
Go ahead.
If you have a pet that you're able to show it affection, pick it up and give it a little hug. You can do that for Petey. Or there's always the other option, and give them a treat. But hugs are better than drugs. With that, you guys take care of yourselves, and peace.